I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting of September 12th, 2023. Call to order. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Members of the board, Ali,
Present.
Grotman,
Present.
Schumann,
Here.
Abens is excused. Or, I'm sorry, Smolik is excused. Abens.
Here.
Members of the administration, Chief Building Official Fursden. Assistant Law Director Morgan. Planning and Development Director Lieber. City Engineer Evanson.
I've been asked to open the meeting this evening. Unfortunately, we don't have a vice chair and our chairman isn't here tonight. So what we need to do is we need to elect a chairperson temporary for this evening.
I would like to make the motion to nominate Paul Schumann for temporary chairperson.
I'll second it.
Call the roll, please.
Ali,
Yes.
Grotman,
Yes.
Abens,
Yes.
Schumann.
Yes. Thank you for your confidence, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Okay, so you should have received copies of the minutes from the July 11th meeting. Any comments, questions, compliments? Seeing none, we'll have them stand as written. We'll move on to correspondence. Director Lieber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were 4 zoning certificates approved since Planning Commission's last meeting, so we welcome Hope for the Soul Ministries, Nico's Gyros to Go, North Ridgeville, Underdog Training Academy, and KLT Insurance to North Ridgeville. Also, we approved administratively for VFW Post 9871, detached pavilion over their existing concrete patio. So those are the updates for zoning. And then on our master plan, our last, most recent steering committee meeting was August 29th. The steering committee convened and crafted some recommendations. Given the last round of public input we had in July, we are taking all that information, the analysis, the input, and we will be having a meeting next in probably mid-October where the first half of the draft plan will be discussed with the steering committee to follow the second half, I'm guessing probably the November timeframe. And then we'll be also having a final round of online public engagement before we wrap up the planning process and go through the adoption phase. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we're getting into the meaty part, which is exciting. So thank you.
Very nice, thank you. There is no old business before us, so we'll move on to new business.
First applicant, PPZ 2023-0214 North Ridge Point Subdivision, end of Sophia Lane, PPN 07-00-030-000-008 and 179 and 075. Proposal consists of amending the preliminary plan for the subdivision regarding the layout of the residential lots and adding an additional 20-acre piece of property. Property zoned R1 Residence District. Planning Commission granted preliminary approval in 2008 and revised in 2009. Final plat approval of Phase 8 was granted earlier this year.
Can we have a representative from,
Good evening.
Can
My
you-
name is Dale Haywood, engineering consultant, here on behalf of my client, North Ridge Point LLC, Gary Smittick. Here to request the amended preliminary plan for the North Ridge Point subdivision. If I may, I'll hit a few of the highlights of the proposal, then answer any questions you might have. The additional property to be added to the approved preliminary plan is an additional 20-acre parcel, which would add 23 standard lots and 3 cluster lots to the development, all within the confines of the agreed-upon regulations for the development. The density proposed would be 2.05 homes per acre, which is less than the 2.3 homes per acre maximum. The percent of cluster homes proposed is at 35, which is the maximum. 26% of open area would be provided, whereas 20% is required. All standard lots will exceed the minimum requirement of 12,800 square feet, and all cluster lots will exceed the required width of 55 feet. Yet to be developed with the amended preliminary plan would be a total of 46 standard homes and 50 cluster. That's all I have to offer at this point, but other than to note that we met with staff at a pre-application hearing on the 29th, and we discussed the plans and made some revisions. We tweaked things a little bit to make them more palatable and provided the revised drawings that are before you tonight.
I'm gonna ask the administration, we'll go down the line and get comment. Mr. Fursden, our chief building official, you have any comment?
To the best of my knowledge, they corrected all the comments that the building department had, and the rest is up to planning commission.
Thank you. The city engineer?
Mr. Haywood, I did have one comment regarding the easements for drainage. I noticed on the overall plat, it said owned by HOA easement to the city. So when you do come forward with the final plat, I would ask that you strike the to city and make the easement to the HOA with our typical language that we usually put on the plat.
The standard language we've been including in all the plats, yes.
Yes,
We'll do
that's,
that.
that's correct. And of course, final engineering does need to be done to come yet. Yeah, with the next phase. But I did want to also mention, we're asking to be a little more definitive in the engineering plans regarding green space and landscaping. So when you do submit the final engineering plans, if you could include what those provisions are as far as like seed type and topsoil depth and any plantings that the developer might elect
That's
to.
reasonable. We'll do that too.
I know in the past we hadn't really done that, but I would ask you going forward to include those as well.
Yes.
I don't know if in the pre-hearing meeting you talked at all about the road that'll be stubbed for any future development. Will you have a T-type turnaround there as well?
We will, but I think our preference would be to put the circular turnaround in.
Okay, but
If it's temporary, it would be a T-style, yes.
yeah.
Between phases.
I just wonder, is there, well, when you look at it in the final plans, I wondered if there's enough room for 2 driveways there, both, you know, the sublot drive and then a separate drive for, because that looks to be a more, a smaller lot, a 55-foot lot, so.
Okay.
And then if the road is shortened from the property line.
On Sophia?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
you're right.
that's all my comments. Thank you.
Director Lieber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the applicant for making some revisions to the preliminary submittal. So we had asked for a little better distinction between lot types, which they provided. As the engineer mentioned, they have provided for a cul-de-sac turnaround on Sardinia, but Sophia is dead end, and that lot 13 does look like it's a pretty narrow lot to accommodate like a half T turnaround, so that lot 13 might need to be eliminated until a future phase would allow for connectivity at that point. And I think along the lines of also the city engineer, at this point, planning commission's being asked for preliminary approval, but that preliminary approval then results in detailed engineering, going through the engineering department for permits to construct the streets and the utilities. So you will have a chance to see landscaping and grading at a greater detail during a final plan, at which point a lot more of those details regarding the ponds, landscaping, preservation areas, access points, mailbox locations, street lighting, all those things will be presented. So the planning commission's really being asked to approve a layout and then to allow this project to move towards engineering. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any comments from law? Thank you. Okay, so to the commission, any questions from the commission?
No questions, I just want to emphasize that I'm all about the landscaping and making it look, more presentable.
And again, that'll be before us in the future. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Not at this point.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open this up to the public then. If there's anybody who would like to come, if you could please identify yourself.
Hi, Holly Swank, 36259 Center Ridge. We currently have schools busting at the seams. We have a high school that's way over, in my opinion, they should just shut it down because it's at capacity, further than at capacity. What are the builders' plans to help with that?
Any comments on that? Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Any comments from the commission at this point?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I echo Councilwoman Swank's concern. We have just growth that is exponential. I've lived in this town since 1986 in Mills Creek, and not only are the schools overburdened, the roads are overburdened in certain areas. And my concern is that if we continue to build and build and build without taking into consideration the infrastructure, especially the schools, where does it end? And I'm all for growth, don't get me wrong. I've seen this town improve dramatically in the 30-some years I've been here, but I just echo Councilwoman Swank's concern that this is a big problem.
I guess my question would be, is that even part of our purview here? Is that something that we have to look at every one of these projects individually? We aren't really here to do a study on the whole city. Is that
Right.
correct?
You are correct, Mr. Chair. The role of the commission is to look at what's in front of you, evaluate whether it complies with our ordinances, whether they've done what we asked them to. I understand the concerns, and it's a bigger concern, and maybe where the master plan is being worked on, things that are looking at overall picture is a better place to address those concerns, but I understand those concerns.
And again, this is a recommending body, so any decision we make here goes to city council. Well, this isn't the final say on anything. Is that correct? Am I correct in that? Thank you. Okay, so you got anything further from the developer?
No, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Okay, at this point, I guess I'll entertain a motion. Anybody?
I'll move to approve.
Can we include or should we include the T on Sophia as part of the approval, or is that something engineering will do?
Wouldn't hurt to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So then I'll move to approve with the provision that the T is put in at Sophia.
Any further questions or comments?
For a second.
I make a motion to second.
Thank you.
Ali,
Yes.
Grotman,
Yes.
Abens,
Yes.
Schumann.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
Next applicant, PPZ 2023-0215, Hampton Place subdivision, PPN 07-00-029-000-203, and 07-00-029-000-515. Proposal consists of amending the preliminary plan regarding the layout of the residential lots and adding an additional 16.9 acre piece of property originally reserved for future commercial use, property zoned R1 Residence District. Planning Commission granted preliminary approval in 2009 and amended in 2013.
Is there somebody here from the developer?
Good evening. My name is Jason Fishbach. I'm here representing Valori Properties in regards to this. This is obviously the final phase of Hampton Place, Phase 8, which is going to consist of 44 single-family and 11 cluster family homes. And on this, the total acreage on that whole site would be 28.41 acres total. And I do believe that the 16.9, according to what was already discussed, was approved at one point in 2009.
At all? You good? Stick around. So let's go with the administration, then next. Mr. Ferguson, you have any comments on this?
Again, they made the corrections that we discussed in the planning commission meeting. And again, this is just a preliminary approval because it's an amendment to the original plan.
Okay. City
Yes,
engineer?
Mr. Chair, I had a couple questions. I apologize, Mr. Fishbach, I wasn't in the pre-hearing meeting, so did we talk about the wetlands mitigation at all? Are you currently seeking permitting for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
Is it complete mitigation then?
Yes.
Okay, okay. What about abutting neighbors on State Route 83? This looks like a similar situation to the State Route, or to the Stony Ridge
Correct.
phase that was abutting with those houses that had household sewage systems. Did the surveyor investigate the drainage outlets for all of those systems?
So what we did do was, we did have it surveyed
Okay.
across the back. We separated those homes that you're referring to
Okay,
to our property,
okay,
of which there are some existing structures and things belonging to some of those homeowners on 83
okay,
that have encroached onto our property. As far as septics and those types of things,
Yeah.
I don't have that information at this time.
okay. Has there any thought been given to perhaps providing an outlet, a separate storm sewer system for them for potential hookup, or?
We've discussed it if it was needed, and we found that it was necessary. Yes.
So it's still being investigated, is that what
Yes,
you're saying?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, definitely during final engineering review, I'd want to discuss that a little bit more to see what our action plan is, because I feel like it is going to be a similar situation.
Okay.
Can I ask who would determine if that's necessary?
So each case ends up being a little bit unique. What we found on Stony Ridge was those systems were failing. A lot of them were failing, and unfortunately, the water wasn't deemed clean enough to be connected to a storm sewer system. So then basically, those residents had no outlet until they upgraded their sewage system to something meeting current standards before they could connect to a storm sewer system. And the developer in the previous phase has made an allowance for them to connect should they upgrade their system and meet the county health requirements to connect to a storm drain.
So they have septic systems.
Yes,
And a lot of them, you're saying a lot of them are failing?
Well, I
Or
don't,
just-
I can't speak
Okay.
on this side, but on Stony Ridge, we
Okay.
did have that situation occur where there were failing systems that had no outlet. And so it became a situation.
Is this something that we should include in our potential approval here?
I think that would be helpful to include.
And then, but then who would deem it necessary? Would that be your office?
As I mentioned, like each case can be unique and different. So
Okay.
if we could make maybe perhaps some provisions for drainage along the neighboring abutting property line, that would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, we would need approval from the health department prior to any connections made by the existing property
Okay.
owners.
So basically, an allowance has to be made for that to be done.
It would be beneficial if we had some kind of, I don't know if maybe a storm sewer, a conduit is necessary, could be at open channel, Mr. Fishbach. Perhaps we could do something like that, but I think just providing for an area along that shared property line, abutting
Mr.
property line.
Mr. Chairman, we
Go
need to
ahead.
be careful about asking the developer to do something they're not technically required to do. Was there not a separate agreement already on that issue, or an
There-
easement, or some?
Unfortunately, I will tell you what happened on Stony. A lot of these residents they have discharge points outside of their property on other property. Usually it's farm fields, ditches, and no easements, no contractual agreements. So then you run into the issue where you're now removing those outlets with
Are
no
these
provision.
properties that need the drainage part of this development?
I'm sorry, say again.
Are the properties that need the drainage the
No,
ones with the
they're the
failed?
neighbors.
Yeah, it's a little tricky asking the developer as a condition of approval to do something related to somebody else's property, but
Well,
I'm sure they'll work with
Can we
us.
give consideration? Can we,
I think based on history, I think we've proven that we will work with.
Yeah.
We did that for Stony Ridge to the best of our ability, and I think
and it is appreciated,
we
so.
look at any and all options just to be good neighbors, that's for sure. I think we proved that on Stony Ridge.
You
No,
know,
you-
we
you
don't doubt
have
your
been.
sincerity or anything like that. It's just, if we don't put it in writing,
Sure.
we don't have it. And then, down the road,
So are you saying, Ms. Morgan, we should not,
perhaps you
I would
could.
caution against including it because it's not part of the application, it's not part of their property, it's not part of their
Is there a
development.
way that we could word it that it would be acceptable to you?
Well, he's indicated that he will work with us, and they have in the past.
Okay, well, if that's your
I'm
recommendation.
comfortable with that.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Are we good then?
I did have, well, along those same lines,
Okay.
I did have concern with some of the grading. Obviously the final plans haven't been developed, but I would just ask your engineer to look at that as well. There's some steep drop-offs on the back of these sublots that abut the neighboring properties. And along those same lines, I would just, caution you to keep storm drainage within the,
And we are, in fact, we're already looking into that as
Okay,
we speak.
within
So,
the property.
yeah, we've been looking at
Yeah.
that situation for sure.
all right.
It's always really frightening to people when something's getting built by them and they're worried about water, so.
I understand.
Okay. Director,
Yeah.
are you good? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am good, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Lieber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A part of this amendment is to repurpose property that was designated as future commercial to residential. So the original preliminary plan showed a new road that would outlet onto 83 through this future commercial area. Note the developer did not go through a rezoning process, so it is currently zoned R1. I did ask the developer to be prepared to speak to the rationale for changing that intended future use to residential. So if they could address that, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, I'm sorry, I came late, something came up, I couldn't be here on time. Tony Valori, the original developer and the developer, Jason's the project manager, obviously know that. When we first started this property, 2007, you know, I was in contact with Giant Eagle and Kroger and Meredith, what's the one that ended up on 90 and Meyer. And all three of them showed an interest in trying to come in the middle of North Ridgeville, and they saw that corridor as being a commercial corridor ultimately. And we thought because it's 446 lots or 426 lots, it might be a good idea to mix it in. Well, it never came to pass. They passed, they walked. Giant Eagle extended where they're at next to us on Center Ridge. Kroger never came this way. So what started out as an aggressive plan turned out to be a failed attempt. And it was more because we didn't have a national tenant to take on a project like that. And that's what stopped it ultimately. And, you know, here we are 13 years later or whatever it is, and there's no commercial need in there since Center Ridge now is exploding and expanding like it should. And so that's why we've changed directions on it. At that time, we asked about it because we envisioned that we could go south into the Stopper property and go all the way up to Center Ridge because there's a lot of backland there, but it turned out to be this extremely amount of wetlands that you can never really get much further than we're at to the south. So that's why we abandoned that plan and went back to residential, which was really suited for in the beginning.
Thanks, sir.
So, Mr. Chair, I bring that up because I know that there's always concern with the addition of housing and some of the issues pointed out with the previous application. But in this case, the outlet that would have been potentially constructed on Avon Belden would have been offset from the street across Mildred. We just had that Barris Road realignment project where traffic issues were created due to an offset. And I fear that would have just resulted in another situation where the city would be spending millions of dollars some years ahead to resolve some traffic situation. So from a safety perspective, I'm not displeased that that exit is now gone from this development. I think it would have posed some issues, some safety hazards. The two lots now that front 83, they are part of the development, even though they're not internally connected. Also, that would have added commercial activity in the backyards of residents on 83 that would have traffic on one side of them and commercial activity behind them. So perhaps without acquiring those 83 frontage lots, it was more of just a futuristic idea and less a well thought out plan. So for that reason, I'm not opposing that change of the preliminary plan due to the potential neighbor impacts and also the traffic impacts.
And you said this is already zoned R1?
It is.
So there's no zoning change that has to take place?
There is not.
Okay.
The applicant has responded to other comments to provide additional information, to provide maintenance access to certain common area, we've discussed a bit how to demonstrate how, the grading and drainage will work to not have negative impacts to those properties on Route 83. So we'll need to continue to work with the property owner on those things. And again, this is a preliminary approval, so you will eventually see the final plat that will have a bit more detail, though the developer did include quite a bit in this preliminary plan. Thank you.
No questions.
No questions, right? Thank you. All right, we'll ask the commission members if they have any comments or questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Couple of
Councilman.
questions. The two lots that are on 83, do they have houses there now, or?
There are not houses there now.
Okay, so they're empty, so.
They are empty.
And the other question I would have too is those areas where Hampton touches Avon Belden and Stony Ridge, are there sidewalks in those areas?
Yes.
It's a big push now within the city for sidewalks in those areas.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else?
No.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to offer public to make comment if they'd be interested in doing so. Go ahead.
Here we go.
We'll start with the councilman.
Good evening. My name is Jason Jacobs, 36121 Atlantic Avenue. Thank you, Mr. Schuman, for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to echo some of the comments made by the city engineer regarding drainage on the property. As a council person here in the city, I can tell the commission that I have already been contacted by homeowners that live along 83 whose property will abut these Phase 8 properties. who have already stated that with the expansion of phases 6 and 7 in the development have caused additional stormwater to end up on their properties. So, you know, I'm pleased to hear that the developer is looking to work through those issues, but just wanted to point out that it has already been stated by some of those homeowners that the problem exists currently with, you know, as a result of phases 6 and 7.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
Holly Swank, 36259 Center Ridge. You missed the last one, but my question is to the subdivisions is, what are we going to do to help alleviate the overabundance of kids in our school systems that are busting at the seam? Just looking for if you have any ideas or
Me?
the builders.
I have no idea what the school system's doing, but I can tell you that,
They're busting at the seams.
yeah, I know. I can tell you it adds tax dollars to support the school system, which is good. And I think that no matter where you're at in the communities, like we started at Kerr and Westlake, and it's pretty much like we're seeing here, that the town's grown and grown and grown. And that's an ongoing concern for the whole community.
Yeah, that won't pass a levy.
Well, by the
It's
grace of God,
140
I hope
more
it does.
homes.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Good evening. Gary and Georgia Meisner, 6068 Avon Belden. Regarding this Hampton Place subdivision, can someone tell me how soon this is going to happen?
Director, you have any idea? Mr. Valori? You have any-
As we go through our preliminary plans and then submit as engineering, you know, that process takes 3 months, probably 2 months, who knows? I hope a week and a half, but I know it won't.
Right.
So as soon as we get through the approval process and we come in full agreement on how we're gonna help with water and sanitary and storm, so that timing is based on our engineers getting everything back that we need to get back and Christine taking a good hard look at it so we get it done. And, so from our perspective, if we could get all ready to go and start sometime November, December, that'd be pretty aggressive, but hopefully January, February at the latest, and paving sometime in the spring, that would be our,
That soon?
yeah.
Okay. I viewed the plot today and looking at it, particularly sublot 388, and it's tight. Now, the two main concerns my wife and I have is, number one, probable loss of our peace and privacy that we have some right to as taxpayers in good standing. And number two, the potential for stormwater and runoff coming onto our property, as we've heard already. So how would the developer accommodate us in that respect?
From the perspective of drainage, that'll all have to go through engineering to make sure that we keep water on our side and not push it to yours. Actually, when we come in with a subdivision like this, we end up picking up some of your water. And the reality of this property, if you look to the top of it, I don't know if you can see from where you're standing here. You see all the little lines on top, how tight they are? When I say on top,
May I?
on the properties that back up to the home, Avon Belden, you see how the lines are? See all the little lines? Those are great.
That's
So our property's higher than yours. So what's gonna happen is your property's draining towards ours and we're draining towards the back. And that's where we're gonna be picking up the water to take it away from both properties. As far as privacy, there's nothing, we're building homes there, unfortunately, that's what happens over time. Somebody shows up, we'll be dealing with all that for engineering. I mean, we're not gonna be putting water on anybody's property, right? When you take, you made, someone just made a comment about
Can you guys step back to the microphone? It would be so much easier. No, that's okay. Appreciate what you're doing.
phase 6 and 7, when that went in, nothing's coming towards 83 at all. I mean, you know, so whatever's happening there, will all, anything that's happening here, you're right here is your home, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So behind these, we're gonna have drainage collection areas, collecting the water that's running off of our property and going down towards your property, which is gonna keep it off of your property. And that we do through our engineering submittal in our plan. So no, and I could tell you, City of North Ridgeville is a blessing because they're very conscious of not letting that happen. So we have the same commitment to doing what's right ultimately, which is gonna be good for all of us, and it's gonna be also good for the city, because they don't wanna, I always say, have the resident call me and I'll explain it to them. So our goal is to put no water on your property. As far as privacy, the good news for you, there's only one house behind you, if anything, but,
There's no houses behind us, it's that field.
yeah, I know, but I'm saying when it ultimately is done,
Oh, I see.
so.
I'm a little curious about these lines here. Are these
That's-
elevation markers?
Yes, so it's going downhill. See
So
them?
it's descending, looks like it's descending
It
in a
is.
slope towards
is.
my
Yeah,
property.
we're gonna pick up the drainage behind you with drains. See the distance here?
Guaranteed.
Yeah, guaranteed.
I appreciate that.
I have a question, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
State your name and
State,
address.
yeah, please state your name and address too,
Okay,
please.
I'm Georgia Meisner, Gary Meisner's wife, 6068 Avon Belden Road,
Okay,
Route 83.
thank you.
And you're welcome. And my question is, we've lived here for 10 years, and part of the reason why we bought our property is because of the privacy and peace that the field afforded us. And we find out now that development's going in. Is there any way you could put a buffer, a natural screening of trees and bushes between our backyard
Mrs.
and the
Meisner?
development?
So this project will be back before us again. When it comes back before us, we'll be dealing with buffering and the landscaping on the buffering. Is that correct, Director Lieber?
The landscaping, the commission will be reviewing, but we don't have buffering requirements between residential and other residential development. Our buffering requirements exist where there's commercial or non-residential development adjacent to residential. Providing for drainage is generally not conducive to a tree in that spot because we're collecting water and we're carrying it away and there's underground utilities. So, there might be some potential landscaping, but it might be that property owners have to think about some screening on their own property.
And will these folks be made aware of the next time we meet on this?
Yes.
They will, so they can come and comment on that at that time too, so, right?
Yes, and certainly, this grading and the drainage plan will have to be approved by engineering. And I think first and foremost, the concern is making sure stormwater stays out of people's backyards.
That's
and-
important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Jerry Hansen. I live at 6192 Avon Belden. I'm one of the people that you're talking about, the water and the septic tanks.
Sure.
And I do have some issue with the water. I don't even know exactly where to start, but you said the grading runs back to your property from behind us, but that's not true because the water that
No, I
comes.
didn't say that. I said that right now, the natural lay of the land is, our property is higher than yours naturally, right now.
Then that would mean the water wouldn't be running into my yard,
No,
but it is.
Now, let me ask you, we have not touched the property yet, okay?
I
But
understand.
when we go to develop it, we're gonna be
Right.
picking up any water on our side.
To my understanding, you're gonna raise that area, and
Yeah,
the water's
yeah.
gonna be going the other way.
Yes.
Which would be, basically, my understanding would be there'd be the front yards would be raised, the backyards would still be draining towards us, because all the sumps, all the gutters and stuff would be running back towards us still. There is a drain tile that was put in, and I've discussed it with the engineer and Mr. Jacobs before about the drain tile that was put in the property between us, which is not working. It's holding water at the sump at the crack, and there's a sinkhole in my front yard from the storm sewers that are already existing because it's blocked up. There's water running out of those drains. So my concern is what's going to happen with all this water. I don't have any problem with the development coming in. I've been here longer than Mills Creek has been. So I know you lived there for 38 years, but I saw it before it was Mills Creek. I saw it as a farmer's field. So what I'm really worried about is not the development itself, but the fact that we are on septic, and I don't have an outlet that goes anywhere. It's a leach field that ends in my yard, and it drains through there. Is it up to code? I don't know. God, I hope so, because I don't want to put money into it. But my concern is that water coming in. My neighbor to my south has flooded twice already this spring because that the unfinished grading from the tile that was put in is trapped between her house and that the hump and the ditch. And she's flooded twice. She said have people come in and take care of that twice already. It's not draining. And if you go drive by that section between the street that was dropped and probably your house, you'll see it's flooded all the time. And I don't care. I don't care. I just want to make sure that it's taken care of.
It'll be addressed in our design plans through engineering to take any water off of our property, not to go into yours. And most likely it's gonna pick up some of your water running our way.
That would be fine with me. It's just my concern is that would be taken care of.
That's the goal.
Because the existing structure up front, the infrastructure of the storm sewer is completely failing.
You mean the one on 83?
The one on 83. It's a sinkhole in my front yard. It's stopped. You can see water bubbling out of my neighbor's drain instead of draining, which is coming from that 6-inch tile that was dropped into the 8-inch tile. Some of that is, some of it's coming from south. Now, that's not your fault. It's not the developer's fault, but it is a failure of that infrastructure, and it's not going to get better. And I'm worried about what's going to happen with that water.
Well, all the water coming off our property is gonna be collected on our property, and hopefully it'll pick up off of yours.
That's a lot of extra water coming off that because of the sumps and the roofs and the lawns and the hardscape.
That's what drains are for. So ultimately that will take care of it.
All right, that's my only.
I can tell you engineering won't let us and we won't do it, just dump water on your property. The one concern we have always when we back up the properties that have septic systems is that their septic systems aren't failing and their leach, their secondary leach fields are on their property. And all the things that could come from sanitary is more important to me than stormwater. Stormwater we could collect.
Right, and I'm worried about my septic system
Yeah.
failing. It already, when it gets really heavy rain, some of it does fail. I mean, I can't, my leach field fills from the water's coming off of there
They
already.
get inspected every couple of years.
Yes. So my concern is just please make sure it's taken care of, the water addressed in the plan and not let's say we'll work it out. I'd like to see it in black and white so that it's make sure.
Oh, I can tell you, because he won't let me do it unless it's right.
All right, and I know Mr. Jacobs has addressed my concern and with that water before. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions from the commission members? Okay, well, at this time, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Please.
I will move to approve with the provision that extra attention be paid to drainage.
Nice.
I can't emphasize enough, I will second the motion as long as there's more provisions for drainage.
Ali,
Yes.
Grotman,
Yes.
Abens,
Yes.
Schuman.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Application number 3, PPZ 2023-0219, Ridgeville Farm Senior Housing, PPN 07-00-02-101-013 and -015, also -065 and -086. Proposal consists of final development plan approval and lot consolidation for proposed senior citizen planned residential development. Property zoned R1 Residence District. BZBA approved variance request and conditional use restricted to 55 and older and no more than 58 total units. On August 26, 2021, and Planning Commission approved with condition of constructing a sound barrier.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Aaron Appel, Bram Hall Engineering, 801 Moore Road, Avon, Ohio. Representing SLK Capital. Ryan Kozak was not able to make it tonight. We've got several other members of the development team here, including the architect, the owner's rep, legal side. So yeah, in front of us, we have a planned senior citizens community. We did come in with 58 units 2 years ago. We have reduced the density down to 52 units. These are some of the due diligence exhibits. We've done quite a bit of due diligence, including wetland studies, noise studies, traffic impact studies, site distance studies. And this is our current layout as we see it. The only difference generally from this plan versus our pre-application plan is we did add a project sign off of State Route 83, just off the property there. Happy to answer any questions about the project.
Thank you. I think we'll start with the administration again. Can we go ahead with building first? And
No comments at this time.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I did want to make one note, Mr. Appel. An early conversation we had regarding the water line. I know this is not going to be a dedicated public right-of-way street, but rather a private street. And we had talked about dedicating the water line. After further review of the ordinance and the language, the language that has recently been added was really intended for single-family homes. So I think that we're going to move forward with maintaining that line as private. And so just wanted to give you the heads up on that, and we could talk about that during the full engineering review.
Okay.
And has there been any decision made regarding the sanitary sewer connection as to what alternate is going to be proposed?
Well, I think we've looked at multiple sanitary outlets.
Okay.
And, we understand there's some concern from the city on capacity. We're willing to still consider those alternate outlets as opposed to State Route 83.
Okay.
State Route 83 is still kind of our number one alternative.
Okay.
But we would appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with you on coming up with a economical solution and a solution that makes sense from the city side and the development side.
Sure, and I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lieber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this project had a preliminary approval phase in 2021, and then after that preliminary approval by Planning Commission, the developer went out to obtain financing to build the project. In 2022, they applied for low-income tax credits and were not successful, and then this year applied again and were successful. So this is now considered their final approval, and there have been a few changes that were made. Mr. Appel had mentioned that they reduced the number of units. The street that was to be public is private. And then they've provided additional detail that they didn't have that first time around in terms of landscaping, lighting, and fleshing out some of the amenities for the site. So I specifically wanted to draw the Planning Commission's attention to the detailed landscape plan. So the code does require a 20-foot perimeter buffer adjacent to neighboring residential properties where landscaping or screening to minimum height of 6 feet is required. So the applicant has, you can see in that drawing up there, that along the northern property line, it kind of jogs, and the proposed screening really is kind of the limits of where those dwellings are located. So the Planning Commission, I'd like you to determine the sufficiency of limiting that perimeter buffer to the area with the dwellings only. So I think that's within your discretion. And then also, the minutes had recorded a condition of approval by Planning Commission that a sound barrier be provided for the development. And it wasn't, there wasn't a detailed recommendation of the type of sound barrier. The applicant is proposing a vegetative and earth and mound sound barrier, a 6-foot mound with plantings, and they've, to that end, have submitted a sound study to show the effect of sound reduction from that barrier, but I would also like the commission to weigh in on, does that meet the requirement that you placed on the preliminary plan? The applicant did provide color elevations that were in your board packet, and some other information that we had requested through the detailed review. The entrance sign, the architecture looks fine to me. I just want to make sure, as staff will review the placement to make sure it meets our requirements for setbacks and stays out of sight lines. And before you tonight is not just the request for the development plan approval, but there's a lot consolidation as part of the approval as well. So just to draw your attention to that. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Anything from legal?
When we had a pre-planning meeting, my concerns were mainly about parking, although they have received a variance for that. So I would say that issue is settled, but it doesn't meet the ordinance requirements. But they, like I said, they did receive a variance, so I guess I have no further comment.
Okay, let's go ahead and open it up to the public at this point.
Good evening. My name is Mark Owens. I'm an attorney with Grubb & Associates LPA. I've been retained to represent the property owners at parcel number 0700022101-046 and parcel number 064. Those two parcels have the address of 7667 Avon Belden Road, and it's owned by Richard J. Sturzacker, trustee of the Sturzacker Trust, and Beth Galvez and her husband Isaac Galvez reside there with their children. I had the pleasure of going out there before this meeting to see the property. It's a lovely piece of property. What struck me was how compact everything is. They live right at the curve of the common right-of-way where it curves and starts to head north. At this point, we would urge the commission not to provide final approval for this development until several issues are resolved. The first issue is particularly pertaining to my clients, and that would be they have a driveway, a mailbox, and a light post that are on the Ware parcel, which is the parcel that Karen Ware is selling to the developer. That's been there for well over 21 years. It's been open, notorious. It was actually built, those items were built and put in by Thebos, who owned all of that property at one time. Beatrice Thebo then sold the property to the Sturzackers in 1977. That driveway was there, the mailbox was there. The locations have never changed. So one thing we would like to have addressed, I'd like the developer to address, is whether an easement is going to be provided that's going to cover that driveway, mailbox, light post, because my review of the plan certainly indicates that those items have absolutely no impact on the development whatsoever. So we're hopeful that the developer will work with us and provide assurances that they're going to provide easements for that. There are also drainage pipes on both sides of the existing driveway that drain water away from their property into the ditch that's across from the common right-of-way. Those drainage systems, that's the only thing that keeps their basement from flooding. Their sump pump would be overwhelmed if they didn't have that drainage there. And so we need assurances as well that easements will be provided to keep those drainage pipes where they are and that the drainage will not be interrupted. Those were all put in pursuant to permit many, many years ago and have never been an issue. Just as the driveway, mailbox, light post, none of that has been an issue until the Wares decided to sell the property to the developer. So that needs to be addressed as well.
Could you, where exactly is this driveway and mailbox? Is this the one that comes off the house and goes south? Is that the one?
Yes, it goes straight south from the garage to the common right-of-way. I'd say at least 80% of the length of that driveway is on the adjacent property, the property that's owned by the Ware Trust. At one time, it was all owned by the Thebos. The understanding had been many, many years ago that there was an easement, although we don't see a recorded easement anywhere in the records, but My client does recall seeing a document at one time, and why it was never recorded, we don't know. We can't find that document, but these features have existed since at least the 1970s, probably earlier than that.
That driveway shows up on the plans before us.
Right, it's there. We just want to make sure that the developer has no plans to, other than any road widening that's approved for that common easement, has no plans to try to make them remove that. Most of that driveway is on property that the developer will then own, as is where the mailbox location. And the light posts, most of the drainage pipes. There's also a water shutoff that's right on the property line between theirs and the Ware property. I mean, that obviously needs to be there and stay there as well. So that's the first issue we'd like the developer to address. And the second issue, of course, is the common right-of-way. Now, last time the developer was here, their proposal was we're going to widen it to 26 feet according to city standards. We're going to then give the right-of-way to the city so that the city can go through the process and we'll have a dedicated public road. It's my understanding now it's going to be private. And they're still proposing to widen this little 12-foot, it's 12 to 14 inches, or 12 to 14 feet. They're proposing still to widen that to 26 feet, which I understand is the norm. However, no one has approached my clients to sell their property. No one's made an offer to sell, to purchase property from them. So I didn't hear the developer address that. Last time it was very clear that they were going to have to go to all of the abutting owners and purchase the property they need for that street widening. That has not occurred to my knowledge, other than the Wares. I believe all the other abutting owners are probably here and represented. I know Mr. Haveman's here. But, so I'm curious how they're going to widen that road and take property without any compensation.
Can you address this, Director Lieber, or?
I'll defer to
Okay.
Mrs. Slaughter.
Thank you.
Well, Attorney Owens, when I hear you say open and notorious, and are you suggesting there's some sort of adverse possession at work here?
Well, technically, there wouldn't be adverse possession because there was a break in ownership within that 21 years. I was using those terms to emphasize the fact that it's been there, it's been out in the open. These features have never been questioned or a problem until this development came along.
Well, this would be between, obviously, the owners now and the developer. I'm sure the developer can perhaps speak to their intentions this evening. But as far as indicating to them what kind of legal action they have to take, that's pretty outside the parameters of what we do. So I would, at this point, I would just say, let's wait and see what they have to say, and then take it from there.
Obviously,
Because
our
the
goal is-
developers usually try to, they want to be good neighbors all the time.
Sure.
And they usually try to work with everyone.
Would you like to
But you say there's
respond?
no
I'm sorry.
recorded easement for this.
There is not a recorded easement that we've been able to locate, but again, that driveway that's their access to the common right-of-way. That's how they get to the road. it's
And
been
there's,
there forever.
sometimes there's easements of necessity and those sorts of things. But
Right.
let's see what the developer has to say first.
Okay. Could I just mention, the other thing with the road widening is my clients are concerned about, they have some very mature trees on both sides of that right-of-way. They want to make sure that those trees are going to be preserved. And from at least the October 2021 meeting, my understanding was they were trying to skew things as far to the left as possible so that they would only go possibly a maximum of 7 feet onto the side of the property where the homeowners' houses are located. But we want to make sure that that's still the case and that they're going to preserve the trees that are there. And obviously that they're going to compensate, they're going to purchase this land from the abutting homeowners. They have not done so, to my knowledge.
Okay, do you want to address,
I would just add a couple things that I can speak to from an engineering and surveying standpoint. As far as the drainage goes, we're going to maintain drainage. What's out there now is going to be able to drain into a new system with stormwater management. On the legal side, I would invite our legal rep for the team to come up
Thank
and
you.
answer that.
Thank you, Commission members. Brian Bonham, 35765 Chester Road, Avon, Ohio, 44011. Counsel for the applicant. Yeah, this is not an issue of adverse possession. In fact, this is not an issue, as the Assistant Law Director alluded to just a minute ago, where there's encroachments. Yes, they've been there, but it's a private matter, something for us to work out, and we have indicated that we will discuss it with them. So, I mean, as far as that issue, that's where I think everything stands.
Is the, where the driveway and the road is going, is that owned by your client?
So there is, and it's reflected on the, I don't know which maps.
Lot split and consolidation, the existing
Yeah.
egress easement.
So there's a recorded easement from
Okay.
1950s. So when the turnpike was constructed and came across, right, you know the slope that comes up, and so
Yes.
everybody that was basically south.
Correct.
Yeah, everybody south would be landlocked because of the slope that comes up.
Right.
So there was an easement granted. The road was actually the drive, that area, that shaded area, was constructed by the Ohio Turnpike at that time to provide everybody there access, ingress and egress from their respective properties to Route 83. And all of these properties, in fact, obviously it's part of the right of way, but they all go to the center line of Route 83.
So the road, let's call it a road, the driveway coming in is going to be within that easement,
Yes.
totally within that easement.
Yes.
So even if it's 26 feet, it's still within that easement.
Yeah, and Aaron can speak to the dimensions. I'm not the engineer, but yes.
It's really, this doesn't seem like this should be something that we have to deal with. I don't know that.
No, I agree. This is not the sort of thing that we can make a judgment call on. We don't have all the information.
Sure.
So we're looking at the application in front of us, how well it meets the parameters that we require. That's our obligation there, and they can work on easements and other issues.
Thank you.
And I said, we've communicated with Mr. Owens, and we've indicated a willingness to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Zane Haveman, 7625 Avon Belden Road. I'm the neighbor of the Galvez family. The question to the developer would be the same. They claim that there's an easement. I haven't seen it. I have copies of all of the easements. There's a single shared driveway, single lane. They now want to build a double lane. I'd like to see that easement, please.
Again, the exhibit that's in front of us here, that has the easement that's shaded on there.
It's a drawing. I'd like to see the easement, please.
Okay.
I'm Tom Tebow. I live at 7609, the front entrance off the thing. And I grew up on the property that's being sold. According to this attorney, this light pole they erected just a couple months ago. They knew it was on our property when they erected it. As far as their mailbox, over the years we've asked them several times to move it. One time they were replacing it. I asked them to move it onto their property, and they wouldn't. They've been encroaching. As far as their drain lines, they dug up our property one day. I come home from work and there's trenches, and they dug lines through our property to the ditch. I don't know if they ever got permits to do such a thing, but our driveway was blocked for weeks. There was a big hump in the road. They wouldn't repair it. They haven't been exactly the best neighbors to us over the years, and we've tried to deal with them, but that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow. Councilwoman.
Holly Swick, 36259 Center Ridge Road. Has there been a title search with location surveys done on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you make that available?
Yes.
As being the Ward 1 council rep, I'd like to see those. Because those will list any easements, any encroachments, any filed, or not filed deeds or whatnot.
When we were in front of planning 2 years ago, we had
I was here, I remember.
350-page title report that was submitted to the city, so that is on record right now.
And how, that's over 2 years old, correct?
We have a new one as well.
Okay, so you guys have redone that?
Yes.
With the surveys? Okay, thank you.
And no kids going into the schools. Sure, go ahead.
So I'm still trying to figure out the common right-of-way expansion to 26 feet. Now, when they were here before, they didn't argue that the 26 feet was within an existing easement. They were gonna have to go outside of the existing right-of-way, and they were gonna have to acquire property from all these abutting owners. So why now are they not having to purchase any property to expand the road? If someone could explain that, I'd appreciate it.
From a surveying side, there are rights to that access. There are rights to each property owner, I believe, to improve that roadway. And it's much wider than 26 feet. I believe it's nearly 60 feet wide on average, from one end to the other across all those properties.
The easement is.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Anybody on the commission have anything to say?
Question I have, probably doesn't mean much. The property that's between 83 and the Tebow Trail, whose property is that at this point? Do we know? I'm just curious where the trees are.
I'm not exactly sure where you're asking.
That parallels 83. That section that's between the roadway and 83, where
So
I'm
that-
presuming the trees are. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, there are trees within the existing right-of-way. There are trees within the existing easement as well.
Okay, so that's actually Mr. Tebow's and now your property apparently. Is that accurate?
We're in the easement, that's what he said.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Okay, I want to ask about the buffering that you're proposing. Could you pull up the landscape? Because I don't have it all in front of me here. I can't find it, but
There it is.
there we go. So what plantings are those, and how tall are they going to be, and what are they? How big of a buffer are we talking about?
The buffering on the northern property line that abuts the existing residential, I believe we're about 12 feet, 10 to 12 feet wide with the buffer. Those plantings, I don't have it memorized, I apologize.
That's all right.
But that we do have a variety of plantings proposed.
What's the height going to start out at, I guess is the question.
I believe they start off at about 5 feet tall.
So you're actually going to be planting pines and that kind of stuff in there?
It's a variety. I apologize again. I don't
That's all
remember
right.
what's on the north side.
I'm assuming-
Along the turnpike, there's definitely some pines.
Okay. So I'm assuming that the planning has already looked at that buffering. Are you comfortable with it?
Well, I was hoping that the commission would weigh in on what your thoughts were of that screening, but a 20-foot wide strip is required, so they do show like that 20-foot setback, and then minimum 6 feet. So it didn't say at planting, but assuming you have fast-growing varieties that will get there quickly. Like what we don't want is just plants that are, a foot off the ground, and it
Right.
takes 20 years to provide a screen. So, we can have our plant people do a review if need be to ensure that all those plants picked will provide for an adequate screen within the first 2 to 3 years of development.
So it would be appropriate for us to ask for screening to be approved in the future by the planning department, by the administration?
My question would be, what's already been approved? I'm unfamiliar.
There was not a landscape plan previously provided.
But you said something about the buffering was that approved already or no?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's part of this final approval. If you're looking for staff to weigh in, I believe we have someone on staff who has an arborist or some kind of plant certification we can request a review. But I'm not a plant person to be able
Okay.
to tell you the growing habits of these species that were selected.
But I mean, that sounds kind of thin to me for, if it's supposed to be 20 and it gets as skinny as 6 feet, that seems kind of light.
So the height is 6 feet, and I believe that the applicant just indicated the planting area is gonna be 12 feet.
So 12 feet wide. So, I mean, is that spelled out on these plans?
I don't know if it is or not. Do you know, Kim? Whatever the ordinance requires, we can require that they do that. That's never an issue. They always have to do what the ordinance requires. If you want to do something additional that is reasonable,
Okay.
then that's allowed. If you wanted to specify, for example, evergreens, so that would be there
So,
all
but if,
year.
what I'm saying is if we approve this, does that give them a variance on it, or how's that
No,
work?
no, they have
So-
to follow, they have to follow the ordinance. Just on, like on the drainage issues.
Okay.
There's requirements that they, if we just say, yeah, you're approved, they still have to follow each and every ordinance, whether it's for buffering, whether it's for drainage,
Okay.
all of those still have to be followed.
I feel better about it. In regard to the,
I did find some notes. So
Cool.
the two main plants along that buffer, there's a Wichita blue juniper, height is 6 feet. And then there's also giant arborvitae, also planted at 6 feet. And those are staggered and in different combinations. So the width of the overall setback is 20 feet, and then those plants are kind of staggered through, and they will grow up and grow together.
you've got to turn your mic on.
Could have stopped me a little sooner.
Now that
So-
you're done.
The setback is 20 feet. Those plantings will grow. They're gonna start at 6 feet. That's
Oh, I
what's
see.
specified, the giant arborvitae and the green juniper. And you don't wanna space them too close together on day one, because otherwise they just choke each other out.
Sure.
So it seems appropriate, that at least on day one, there should be a 6-foot screen.
Okay, now, in regard to the water line going to the other house, the drainage coming from that house, that has to be made right if they disturb it. Is that correct? Maybe
Well,
the
there
building?
seems to be some disagreement as to whether if you're talking about the drainage pipe that goes on one property to another, that is an issue that they will have to settle, but they'll have to settle it among themselves, because
that's-
we don't have the kind of information
Okay.
we would need to make that decision.
Okay, so it's nothing we're gonna weigh in on.
No,
But they're not allowed to cut off somebody's utilities.
absolutely not.
Okay.
And we wouldn't let them do that.
No, of course not. Okay. All right. Anybody else got any more questions, or?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
as far as your buffering zone, I have to admit, I believe I'm the one who brought that point up at the original planning meeting. And quite frankly, what they're doing is preferable over a wall. Walls don't really work very well. All it does is it pushes the noise to somebody else. But with your buffering that you're proposing, it actually absorbs the sound and holds it there.
You're talking
And-
along the highway.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and so, very pleased that you're putting it in. Councilwoman will not be hearing too many complaints about noise once the residents start occupying, like I get in one of my neighborhoods. So, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Did you want to speak? Please.
Isaac Galvez, 7667 Avon Belden Road. One point on the sound barrier wall, since you were just talking about it. 2 years ago, in your notes, it actually was voted in as a wall. I specifically said
No,
not to do, you did not want
no,
vegetation.
no. Wall was never, I can tell you that just from my own experience, wall was never considered.
Okay, very well. I'll review the notes and get back with you. 2 years ago, Smolik stated in this planning commission that this entire project hinged on 4 purchase agreements. So I'm asking, can we schedule another meeting to discuss this easement that gives you folks the rights to take away our private property before you approve of this plan? And keep in mind, we're spending, over $1,000 for legal counsel because 2 years ago we did not resolve this. And here we are once again addressing an issue that should have been taken care of before we even got to this meeting.
We're dealing with, we have our own, legal representative
Sure,
here,
I
right?
get that.
And she's telling us that these guys have a legit easement.
Have you seen the easement?
Mr. Galvez, what I've indicated is that there's a disagreement here, a legal disagreement, and you've sought representation, and the developer has representation, and that's exactly the appropriate way to resolve that issue. It's not an issue for the Planning Commission. That's not within their purview to do. And when you resolve it, we'll respect the resolution of that.
But you're going to be willingly allowing a developer to take private property from 4 private owners based off of what the developer is saying, even though Zane's got a survey, I have a survey with our easements stating that that is a right-of-way.
We will look at your easements in the law department. Again, it's not the Planning Commission.
I'm sorry, say again?
It's not something the Planning Commission would do. We'll look at those if you want us to, but I believe the steps you've taken already with representation is the best way to get that resolved. And we're not going to build on or allow development to be built on property if they don't own it or have rights to it. But again, that is not the purpose of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission looks at the plans, looks at whether it meets the ordinances and those sorts of requirements. But as far as making a legal determination of who owns what property or has what kind of rights to it, that's just not something that the Planning Commission would do.
So it's my understanding you're going to approve of a final plan without understanding the property rights of 4 parcels?
Well, it's a little bit like what I had said before. We approve the plans, they present it to us, we look at it, we make a determination that this looks like a good idea, we'd like to go forward with it, but they still have to comply with all our ordinances.
Sure.
We don't just say, just do whatever you want. And the same thing would be with ownership to land or rights over certain properties. We can say, this is a good plan, we're interested in it, we'd like to see you do it, but they still have to comply with the law. So nobody's allowed to take property from somebody else.
So can we schedule another meeting then?
Not for the Planning Commission, no.
We're a representative group. I'm sorry, we are a, recommending group.
I understand. We've been here 2 years ago.
No,
Here
and
we
so
are
this will
with
go
a
to,
lawyer, right? So
this will go to city council, and, we have to deal with what's up before us here. And that's not part of our job to look at, we don't, we're limited on what we're able to do. So, I think, you need to work with your attorney and work with their attorney and work it out. Again, and then bring it to the law department.
Okay.
And
All right,
Mr.
well,
Chair.
Just last comment. I mean, it's, it's obvious that we've been here once again. I'm just really disappointed that all of you do not even have a clue of the easements or the purchase agreements. To me, it's something that it should have been a high priority, considering it was in the notes, and it was, you have a recorded YouTube video where it actually stated by Smollett that this was an issue. So just please be more diligent when you review your notes and your video, so we can avoid all of this, because property rights is very important, and it should be taken a little bit more seriously.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add that planning approval is not a permit to construct.
Right.
And that Planning Commission is looking for conformance with our zoning code and our subdivision regulations, and that often all of those details regarding utilities and roadways and access and easements and drainage and sewers and water are worked out during the permitting process. So the developer, if they obtain approval this evening, can't start work tomorrow. There's still a long and detailed review process through building and engineering that will occur.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
May I add also, this does not give anybody unnecessary rights as far as easements are concerned. That is totally between the developer and the landowners, and whatever documents that exist at that point. No, we don't give them permission just to take your property. It still has to be negotiated between the developer and the owner of the property. That's beyond our purview.
Anybody else got anything? Going once, going twice. All right. At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we accept the Ridgeville Farms senior housing proposal.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Ali,
Yes.
Grotman,
Yes.
Abens,
Yes.
Schuman.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
See what I gotta say to close this thing out. With no further business before us, we are adjourned. Thank you.